Okay, this is lesson 48 for 8th grade. Today we're talking about percent of a whole. We have been dealing with this most of the year, and we did get into it a little bit last year. We're going to show you a different way, a couple different ways to go about doing this. But this type of thing we could see anytime we are tipping somebody. Like maybe after we get a meal at a restaurant, we usually tip, 15 to 20% for a decent tip. So finding a percent of how much you spent in order to tip. And there's plenty of other things that it applies to, but that's one of the main ones that we use often. So let's take a look at this. It says percents are commonly used to describe part of a whole. For instance, Shauna answered 92% of the questions correctly. We can use it for test scores. A basketball player has made 80% of their free throws. That applies to sports. The governor was elected with 56% of the vote. We use percents all the time to describe parts of a whole. And it says in this lesson we'll use a 3-row ratio table to help us solve percent problems about parts of a whole. Percent is a ratio with the given percent representing the part and 100% representing the total. Okay, so we're going to use a ratio table that we've used very recently and something we've become familiar with. So that will be helpful. But there are different ways to do these. So first thing though we're going to do is set up a ratio table just to show us what that looks like. Alright, 30% of the students ride the bus. If 210 do not ride the bus, how many students are there in all? Okay, so here's what we could set up. Alright, we have our percent, and then we have an actual count. So for me, I've been using this and calling this actual. Before we would have this as a ratio column, and it still is a ratio column, but it's a percent. And percents are out of 100, okay? So it says 30% of the students ride the bus. So those are 30% that ride the bus. That means 70% do not ride the bus. These two need to add to 100. And it says if 210 do not ride, so that would be across from the do not ride the bus, how many students are there in all? We have a couple different options here. We could go ahead and solve for the total right away if we wanted to. We could also solve for how many ride the bus and then add these two together to get our total. So it doesn't really matter which one we do. The fastest route would be to do, 70 over 100 equals 210 over the total. Set up that proportion. Oops, sorry, 100. Alright, and one thing we can do there, remember our cross products are equal in proportions, so we can do 100 times 210 and set that equal to 70 times t, or many of us know that we could just do 210 times 100 and divide it by 70. And that should give us that answer right there, okay? That's the cross multiply divide method. What I'm going to do is they give us some easy numbers to work with, and I know that 70 times 3, because 7 times 3 gives me 21, so 70 times 3 gives me 210, which means the rule is times 3 for all of these. Alright, so to get my total right away, it says how many are there in all, so we want the total. 100 times 3, this should equal 300. Okay, now let's just double check and make sure that that makes sense. Like I said before, this and this, those who ride the bus and those who do not ride the bus, should add up to 300, our total amount. So 30 times 3 is 90. 90 plus 210 will get you to 300. Alright? And if you would have done your cross multiply method, you still would have got 300 for t. Alright, so just some options there. I think the table thing is pretty nice, and that's probably the easiest way to go about it. One other thing we could have done here, let's look at it. It says 30% of the students ride the bus, and then it gives us how many do not ride the bus. So we know that 70% then, 70% do not ride. So we could set up an equation like this. 70% of the total should equal 210. So 70% as a decimal, 0.7 times the total should give us 210. If we would do 210 divided by 0.7, we would have got 300. Okay? So this is very nice because it allows us to avoid having to think out and how to write an equation like that. But that is an option. We could do that. It just takes a little more thinking. This is nice because it sets everything up for us. So, just a way to think about it. Okay. Let's take a look at this one. Shauna correctly answered 17 of the 20 questions on the game show. What percent of the questions did she answer correctly? Oops, sorry. Looks like this is our last one. So we have to set this one up. So we've got a ratio. So Shauna correctly answered 17 of the 20 questions on the game show. What percent did she answer correctly? So now we're looking for the percent. So we have an actual, so we want percent. Actual. And then we'll have a correct and not correct. So let's do not correct, correct, sorry, and total. Alright, so here's what we've got. So let's take a look here. Not correct. Well, if she got 17 correct out of 20 questions, that means she got 3 wrong. Okay, 3 that were not correct. And we know that, oh, this is the percent side, I'm sorry. 3, 17, 20. Oh, okay, here we go. Now we don't have any sort of percent here. But what we could do is, we know that percents are out of 100 always, so we know that this is going to be 100% in our percent column for the total. And we want to figure out what percent of the questions did she answer correctly. So we're looking for this right here. So, the easiest thing to do then is we do have a proportion set up. We've got C over 100 equals 17 over 20. Okay. And we could do our cross multiply divide again to solve for C. 100 times 17 divided by 20 if we wanted to do that. I'm going to take the shortcut way, and I know that 20 times 5 equals 100, so to get C we should take 17 times 5, okay? And 17 times 5 should give us 35, 5 plus 3 is 85, so should be 85% correct. Alright, plenty of different ways to do this one again. A lot of times, if you get a test score back from me, one thing you can do is 17 out of 20 This is just turning a fraction into a percent. 17 right out of 20. Do 17 divided by 20. That gives you a decimal. Uh, 20 goes into 178 times. 8 times 20 is 160. 170 minus 160 is 10. Drop your 0. 20 goes into 100 5 times. 5 times 20 is 100. Remainder is 0. So 0.85 is a decimal. In order to turn that into a percent, we just multiply it by 100. Or just move your decimal 2 spots to the right. Okay. Either way, right answer. But once again, the table helps us set things up very nicely. Okay, so we're going to go over some more of these tomorrow, and we'll see you then.